for dropping by. Sunday chat today will be a bit all over the place, which is basically how I am at the moment. Not, I don't mean physically, I mean up here. My mind is all over the place at the moment. It's getting a bit fraught. It's got to the point yesterday where I had so much to do, I ended up doing next to nothing. I just couldn't get going. And so I'll have to put up with that. That's how it's going to be. And silly little things, putting things down and then can't find them 5 minutes later. Put the camera away and left it on, you know, so I've just switched it on now. It's dead as a door now, so I've had to get one of the little batteries out. So I'll have to watch the time on this one or it'll just shut down. Right, one thing I did want to say is, obviously I really want to grow the channel and the support. It's important now because of the move and and everything. But what I don't want to be is that guy that says all that cobblers in every single video. I don't want to be that person. It'll drive me up the wall and probably you as well, and you'll get fed up with it. It gets tedious. So what I thought I'd do is, I've got to maximise this sort of thing. I've got to think about practicalities, and to maximise how many people hear that, cobblers, the best place to do it is in the Sunday chat. Yeah? Because that's one of my most popular videos, and in some cases by quite a bit. You know. So, you know, the things that I'll need to cover is, you know, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Doesn't do any harm, doesn't cost anything. You don't have to turn notifications on, but if you want to be notified when a video gets posted, then turn it on. Somebody did suggest that mentioning the like button halfway through the video is a really good idea, because quite a few people might have wanted to do it but just forget at the beginning, because you tend to start a video up and watch it, don't you? You don't sort of think about doing buttons and things. So, it's a reasonable idea. I think I'd rather put all this stuff together, and then obviously I've got to plug the, you know, and if you want to support the channel financially, become a Patreon, and the link's down below, all that sort of stuff. And if you just want to do a quick sort of that was a nice video and leave me a tip, you can use the buy me a coffee and just go. And I managed to find the price in there. If I didn't say before, it seemed to be fixed at £5, which I thought was excessive for a coffee. You know, it might not be in London, but yeah. But I got an answer from the company. I put a query in and they came back to me relatively quickly. And I've managed to change that and bring it down to more like a reasonable coffee price. So it's all set up, it's all done, and if I'm going to put a plug in, I'd rather do it on the Sunday chat and do it once and have done with it. The other thing some of you might have noticed, yes, it's the Sunday chat, but what else is it today? It's the 8th. It's happened again, hasn't it? It seems to happen more often than I thought. But nonetheless, everything in bloom on the 8th is another regular. Okay, it's a monthly regular, but it's a regular. It will now be tomorrow on the 9th. That's happened before. I'm sure it will happen again. So that's not the end of the world. So what I've got to try and do is not show too many blooms today. Otherwise tomorrow will just be a repeat, won't it? So we don't want to do that. The property that I showed back in the last mounting video where I did the Friedrichianum, I sort of, you know, filmed the computer screen to sort of show what the pictures were like of that place. I'm going to view that on Saturday. So I've got an appointment to go and see the place. Now, although it looks great and I'm quite keen, shall we say, I could get there and not like it at all. You know, I've been fooled with pictures before. I remember once, a long time ago, when I was looking at a property, that was years and years ago when I was married, and the property looked absolutely stunning. Couldn't fault it. Where it was, everything looked great. Of course, you didn't have the likes of Google Maps to go and actually have a look in those days. You had to believe the pictures. Didn't even get out the car. Just drove straight past. It was right next to a bus station, and they'd cleverly taken all the photos and excluded that part. So, you know, it sort of came along. Didn't even bother slowing down. Used to get a lot of that. Anyway, it's the only one I've booked to see, because I've now established that there is no rush. There doesn't need to be. My sister that's been a bit pushy, the one that lives around the corner, she's now backed right away. Now that she realises what's actually involved, she don't want to know. She just tell me when it's all done. Just tell me when it's all done. Starting to use expressions she doesn't understand, starting to talk about probate, inheritance tax and everything like that. But what I think I've done is I've found anybody in the UK that knows this specifically, because they've either had to do it or been involved, can you confirm this one way or the other? Because on the sites I've looked up that look reliable, one of them being the government site, should be reliable, basically there is a sequence of events. We won't be able to sell the property or distribute the assets until we've got probate. You can't apply for probate until you've dealt with the Inland Revenue and sorted out the inheritance tax and paid your dues, basically. Otherwise they won't let the assets go. There's logic there, I see that. You can't deal with your inheritance tax until you've got the value of the estate, which means you've got to find out the value of this estate. What is there? What bank accounts? What this, blah, blah, blah. Now there's more of an understanding of why it takes time, because it's going to take quite a while to get that information and have a value. Don't forget, it'll all have to be documented. If you're dealing with the revenue, they don't take your word on anything. It's going to take time. So, I mean, I'm looking at this property. The current tenants don't get out till the end of September. It sounds like a long way away, doesn't it? It'll come round quick. And then the landlord has allowed some time, so he said it'll be available early October. We might not have even got anywhere near selling this place yet. But I am, if I like that place and I really want it, I am prepared to go through the finances and everything and get the keys so that it's mine, and not necessarily move in for an amount of time after, unpredictable. At this point in time, I don't even know where I'm going to be at Christmas. I wouldn't like to put bets on it. But I'll be in one or the other. I'll either still be here and the other place is running alongside. The beauty of it, you know, if this place is being tedious and not getting moving, then I will have chance to pay visits to the other place. Like, do you know, today I'm going to go up and see the property and take some stuff, take some boxes and sort of, you know, dump them in the spare bedroom. You know, perhaps take a, you know, I've got an estate car now with a new car. Just, you know, and just have a look round the place. It looks like there's a lot of water around that area, lakes and things like that. And I've just used Google Maps to drive round some of the roads in that area. It's quite a heavily wooded area, so there's going to be some really nice places to sort of take a walk and film, you know, wildlife type videos, because they, you know, those are relatively popular. I won't say they're for everybody, but you know, 5 o'clock in the morning, go somewhere in the woods and listen to the birds sing. There'll be butterflies. It could be orchids, wild orchids. I won't know. I don't know the area that well. Anyway, so that's what's going on. As I said, if anybody knows that sequence of events, like it sounds logical that you can't deal with the revenue and it, you know, and work out whether you owe them until you know how much you've got. So that does have to come first. That makes sense, and it seemed pretty emphatic on a couple of the sites that you can't get probate until you've dealt with the revenue. They want their bit first before anybody starts handing stuff out, and that also makes perfect sense to me. Anyway, I've had this place valued by 2 estate agents, and they both said exactly the same thing. They both said if it was in tip-top condition, this amount. As it is, this amount. And probably the best way to market it is to say offers over this amount and let it be a bidding war, because at the moment it's a seller's market. There are people screening for properties and not enough property, so let them bid for it, let them fight over it. Mercenary. And also my sister that will be doing a lot of the donkey work as far as the legalities and investigating the estate and all that sort of stuff. She just shook her head and she said, we're not rushing this. I'm at work still. I've got to go to work every day, 5 days a week, and a lot of the time I'm up north, staying away from home. You know, I can't deal with this every day. I'll only be able to drop into it now and again, you know, do some at the weekend and then wait for results to come back. So it's just going to take time. It's just going to take time. So be it. So be it. But it could mean I'm paying for that property when I'm not living in it, which is highly likely to happen, quite honestly. But as I said, it might enable me to get some stuff up there. The last things to go will be my electronic equipment, so TV and stuff, and all the computer stuff, and the plants. And what's left of my clothes that haven't already gone. I can see, if anything goes wrong with that, I can see me having one shirt, one pair of jeans, a pair of pants, and a pair of socks, and that's it. At least if I get a bit niffy, you won't be able to tell, because it's video, and we haven't got smelly vision yet, have we? You might have to put up with my socks. Right, so that's that. Right, now, Sunday chat, it's about time we got back to some orchidy stuff. And what I thought I'd talk about today is Oncidiums and the alliance in general, and the differences there could be in care if you can even find out what the hell they are. So the Oncidium alliance is pretty big. It's got quite a lot of component parts that can be mixed in together. But when you get back to the basic species, the care can be quite different and would then influence the hybrids, so it could be quite important. Now, most of you already know that the fact you've got cold, you've got cooler growers, intermediate and warm, and you could possibly say hot as well. I'd just class that as at the top end of warm. And it's the same with the cold. I just class that as the lower end of cooler. That way we end up with 3 bands. The temperature ranges for those, don't forget when you see a temperature range on, say, intermediate, the low end is supposed to be the night temperature, not the day temperature, because there's supposed to be a difference. So that's your minimum night temperature. The top end is your maximum day temperature. Yeah, they're not supposed to be the same day and night. I'm going to get that out the way first of all. So I'm going to start at the bottom, what I'll call the bottom end, the cooler end. Now you've got 2 very distinct species down there, not actual species, I mean genus, don't I? 2 very distinct ones. You've got the Odontoglossums and you've got the Miltoniopsis. Now, sellers will often call Miltoniopsis Miltonias. They are quite different. They look different and they need different care. Yeah, so when they start getting muddled up in hybrids, it can mess up your care for them. So down the lower end, you've got Miltoniopsis and Odontoglossum. They are classed as cooler growers. Is there any other difference between the 2? Well, yes. Some of the Odontoglossums can take a reasonable amount of light, not highlight. Neither of these 2 are highlight orchids. The ancient runes and the scrolls, and the men sat down cross-legged smoking pipes on the hillside, they will all say shady. But as we've discovered in more recent years, those expressions are subjective. What is shady in Brazil might not necessarily be the same as shady in Scotland or up the top end of the UK, top end of Canada. You know, there are places in the world that are not Brazil, basically, or, you know, you're looking at those lines around the world. You know, there's a line goes through Brazil and then over to Africa and whatever. I think it's called the equator or something. That's your hot bit, unless you're really high up, you know. So those are your 2 cooler ones. And then when you get into the middle, quite honestly, that's where virtually all of the rest live. There aren't many of the Oncidium alliance that are truly classed as warm growing. What you've really got is Oncidium types that don't mind heat. But as I've always said, if you've got a hybrid, if at all, try and find out what's in it. And then once you get back at least to the genera that are included, you can think about the sort of care that genera might get and does it affect my hybrid. If you can get back to the individual species that went into it, you can look them up directly. and you can get direct information, and then all you can do is average, because some Oncidium Alliance things will have 4, not very often more than that, but you've got this species crossed with that species. Well, one of those could have been a hybrid in the first place. That's 3 straight away, and if it was 2 hybrids it could be 4. Yeah, a lot of the Oncidium Alliance are into generics. There's a lot of odontoglossums crossed with other stuff, and if it's got odontoglossum in it, it'll be cooler. Miltoniopsis don't tend to get used so much in hybridization programs. I mean, they're finicky flipping orchids at best. Odontoglossums are not fussy. They're not difficult if you can supply the right conditions. You could say that about Miltoniopsis, apart from they are a bit fussy. They don't like any forms of stress, which is anything. Basically, anything that's not spot on is stress to those flipping things, whereas most of the other Oncidiums are far more tolerant. But you do get the true Oncidiums. They sit in the middle. They're pretty easy going. All of them will be subject to root loss if the media starts going down. And again, those 2 at the cool end, the odonts and the Miltoniopsis, they're more prone to losing their roots and tend to be more difficult to recover afterwards. And a lot of that is because they're relatively slow rooters, so they take longer to recover a root system. You've got different root systems to consider as well. So I'm just grabbing this one because it's under my nose, just to give you an example. Now that type of Oncidium, these are quite fleshy roots, yeah? I mean, these are aerial roots. If I buried those in a pot, they would possibly die. They might cut back and then branch, but changing aerial roots to putting them in a media, you will often get the roots will reject the change and they'll just die back. But these are quite thick fleshy roots. They can be thicker and fleshier than that. They can also get tangled up in your fan. This is the one that springs to mind for big thick fleshy roots, and you notice it comes in and out. I took the bar out. I'm getting fed up with ducking this one in. Now if you look at the roots on this is big thick fleshy roots, yeah, some of the largest on this one, and as a consequence they're a little bit more tolerant of being moved around a bit. What they don't like, which is what happened to this plant, is getting eaten off at the base of the plant by slugs. The whole of the new root system got eaten off. So this one is currently generating a new root system under these 2 nice big fleshy growths. Now this is a Roscioglossum. It is a relative of the Odontoglossums, but totally different looking plant. The size of these leaves. This is a big, sturdy plant, unlike most of the other Oncidiums. So when you think of, well, surely a Roscioglossum can't be that different. Well, yes, it is. Quite different. Much, much bigger. Much sort of sturdier, stronger plant. Fleshier, thicker structure to the leaves. Large sort of pseudobulbs and big, thick, fleshy roots. Now there's others, in fact there's one right behind this one that I can use as an example because it's doing its new roots now. Now this is quite a large plant, but it hasn't got thick fleshy leaves. These are much thinner, much thinner. As such, these would burn a lot easier. They got caught in the sun. Now, those thick fleshy ones I've just shown you are a darker green, full stop. And I always say if a leaf is a dark green, it'll take more light. You don't push all at once. Don't sort of buy a plant and think, oh, that's got nice dark green leaves, I'll put that on a sunny windowsill. No. Gently, gently, gently. Small changes at a time. But this is a large plant, but look at the size of the roots. They're quite fine. This is not a large fleshy root system. You see the new ones come in here. They're quite fine. Now that is that type. Oh, I don't even know what this is. Ah, this, you'll love this. This is a Cambria. Now, once upon a time, that intergeneric name actually meant something. I think there were 3 component parts, and they were quite specific. Yeah? Whereas nowadays, that's just a generic word used by the trade to try and sound a bit flashier than just putting Orchid on the label. Whereas it's no flashier at all, quite honestly, because it's just as useless. Tosspots. But it is a well-used expression that just basically means Orchid. It will normally mean an Oncidium type. They don't sort of stick Cambria on a Cattleya, so it will still be an Oncidium type. It doesn't venture too far away. But yeah, so different types of root systems. And your root system normally dictates what you want to put them in, but not always. What I'm getting at is very fine root systems are not normally quite so happy in great big chunky media, and big thick fleshy roots are more happy in chunky media. That's not always the case. That Roseoglossum does not like too much air around its roots. Tends to be a bit more like a Zygopetalum. You know, it likes quite a compact media that can stay moist, so that the air requirement is not so big. You probably wouldn't grow that very well on a mount unless the roots were covered. If it started producing a lot of aerial roots, it probably wouldn't hydrate so well. It's such a big chunky plant with thick fleshy leaves, it takes in a lot, you know, to push that on. So in that medium section are the majority. There are some that will tolerate heat. Sort your media out. Oncidium types all do well mounted. Even a Miltoniopsis will grow on a mount as long as you look after it the way it wants to be. So it would be quite heavy on the moss compared with some of the others because it needs to stay moist. It would enjoy it a lot if it didn't get left 2 or 3 days and go bone dry, yeah, because of the type it is. But you could grow it mounted if you wanted to. But you would need to keep it more shady than perhaps most of your other mounts. Like if you've got a load of Dendrobiums, they tend to be a bit higher up the light range. Some of them quite high up the light range. Miltoniopsis won't take too much light. It's a form of stress for them. Too much shade's a form of stress for them. Anything that's not right is a form of stress for them. They can be a fussy flipping lot. Oncidium types you will come across, things called Cambria, along the lines. The ones that you will often find named, even in amongst the, the mass-produced stuff, you know, from the huge nurseries in sort of Germany and Holland, places like that, is the brassias. Now they're often named, yeah? And even if they haven't got the actual hybrid name on them, or the species, if you're really lucky, they will still have the word brassia on them. Now, those are quite thick, fleshy rooted, but not the biggest. That mount I showed earlier is actually a brassia. I think, I can't remember. It's not got a tag on it. There's 2 up there. One's Sweet Sugar and one's Brassia Shelob. No, it's not actually a brassia, is it? It's Shelob Tolgin anyway. It's a brassia cross into generic. Forgotten where I got to now. Yeah, the brassias. Now the brassias are okay in the intermediate section. They don't mind some heat. They don't like to get silly cold, but they'll also tolerate some cooler night temperatures. But they like brighter light. And it doesn't show. The leaves don't look any different to any of the others, but they like to be up the brighter end than, you know, than those that are classed as shady. I don't like using the word shady because it gives an impression that might actually have people keeping orchids in the dark as far as the plant's concerned. It's still got to photosynthesize. It has to have an amount of light. On the subject of brassias, I know it's everything in bloom on the 8th, on the 9th, tomorrow, but you can have a look at this one because this one took me by surprise. I found it the other day. I've been spraying the plants a lot recently because I just haven't got the time to go over them one at a time and everything. even though some of that day is doing nothing, it's all this buzzing around in here that's busy. But I sprayed that plant, so I put the long nozzle thing in through the other plants because this one was right up against the glass, and I sprayed it. And I didn't notice that sticking out the top. I knew it was in spike, but I didn't notice it had opened. See, now these are relatively fleshy roots. This isn't a fine root system. Anyway, that one's open. That's Brassias Santa Barbara. That came with my Vericosa from Burnham's last year. Now this is a strange one because when you get up close to show the centre of the plant, which is where the lip is, you don't see the size of these blooms. If I stretch my hand right out and put it next to that bloom and back up a bit, from tip to toe, it's probably another 2 or 3 inches bigger than the whole of the width, the spread of my hand. So these are very, very large blooms, but they're not substantial. They're wispy, hence the nickname spider orchids, because they do look a bit like that. I tell you what does look like a spider, if it catches the light right, is the shadow. Because it could be even bigger than the shadow could be bigger. I think there's some sort of flipping tarantula on your table. But yeah, that just caught me by surprise. So I've got that out. I've got a bit of rearranging to do out here because there's different things in bloom. Some things are fading, some things are coming. It is changing a bit. But I just thought I'd show you that one. It is, after all, in the Oncidium Alliance, brassias. And the other Oncidiums you will come across quite a bit. And they are often favoured by people who grow in the home, because first of all they don't mind growing in the home. They don't need that really high humidity. They like sun, but they don't need it high. So they'll put up with being in the home, and they're the smaller ones. Some Oncidiums, like some of the ones I've shown, get pretty flipping big. If you're trying to get them on a windowsill, you're going to end up with leaves touching the glass, and they're going to go. The sun will either get them, or the cold will get them, one or the other. But the twinkles can grow into substantial plants, but they're not big, if you see what I mean. If I can get it down, there's something actually in the way at the moment. Just move that a minute. You can go up there for now. That allows me to get at this. This is my most substantial twinkle at the moment because it's one that hadn't been disturbed for a while. Its older leaves are starting to go now, so that it is starting to lose its set of older leaves like that. But then it's growing new growths. Well, you could start here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's down one side. 6 along the bottom. 7, 8, 9 in the middle, coming up the other side. Not much actually up this side. This is the oldest part of the plant. And then along the top, where did I get to? 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. There's about 15 new growths on that. That's going to substantially increase the size of the plant. But that is tiny twinkle. It is a miniature twinkle. So that's about the smallest one you'll ever get. But the number of bulbs isn't small. If you bought that, a little piece of that in a pot with 3 or 4 bulbs and a new growth, you're looking at a plant that big, just that little bit. So that's my smallest, but it's my twinkle with the most number of bulbs. And then quite a few of the other twinkles are recovering because they got left in their pots too long, but they are getting going again. This one's starting to come on a bit now. Come out. Hook's got going. So this one's starting to get going again. You can see this one is capable of having quite larger leaves than the one we just looked at. But nonetheless it's still a twinkle, and it's still a relatively, if that was in a pot you'd be looking at a plant, this big. It's not a giant by any means. And their spikes are some of the slowest growing you can get. Don't hold your breath. They tend to start at the beginning of autumn, and some of them don't open till Christmas. They are slow. But all the twinkles have pretty small blooms. I'll probably be putting some pop-ups as I edit this later on. as I play with it. So, but it makes up, the twinkles make up for the small blooms by the sheer weight of numbers and the fact that the majority of the actual pseudo bulbs produce a spike out of each side. So the new growths are capable of producing two. They are quite floriferous. Now, one of the parents, Oncidium sotoanum, probably one of the most fragrant of the Oncidiums, and that's where the twinkles get their fragrance from, mainly. Now that is a large Oncidium. Makes you wonder, you know, you sort of think, well, hang on, the twinkles are quite small and one of the parents is huge. Yeah, well, the other parent isn't huge. The combination makes for a tidy little plant. But the sotoanum, for such a large Oncidium, has got one of the finest root systems, and it will collapse in a very short space of time if it dries out in heat, which is why I lost my root system on mine. I didn't keep up with it. So, you know, I'm recovering mine at the moment, slowly. Because it's such a large plant, losing the most of its roots, it just won't grow now. It can't get going. So, you know, the new growths are there, but they're so slow. It's not moving, it's just sort of ground to a halt. I think it will pick up again, but it's going to be slow progress because it's a large plant trying to support itself with a very small root system. It don't work so good. Now, with the Oncidium Alliance, they've all got pseudobulbs of varying sizes, so they're capable of holding nutrition and hydration when they're not getting any more in from the bottom because you've lost your root system. But they can only do it for so long, and then they will start to shrivel, and they can shrivel down to such an extent that the plant is not far off lost, even though it still might have quite a lot of its leaves. Don't forget, all orchids feed themselves through their leaves, so they're topping up their it's like it's say, you know, you can live without food for some time but not without water. And then different schools of thought will say the minimum content you need in your food to live, not to be comfortable and happy, but to just actually not die. And I think it's fat and protein. And everyone's, no, you've got to have carbohydrates. Your body will make that if it needs it, same as it'll make sugars. You need to get the fat in there and the protein, and that's the absolute bare minimum. I could think of quite a nice diet based on those two. Anyway, that's irrelevant, that's sort of food. But with orchids, you know, they are feeding themselves some basics via the photosynthesis, but I don't think it has all the component parts to support heavy growth, you know, whole new structures and things like that. That needs the stuff coming in from the roots, what you give it, your fertilizers and that. So, yeah, Oncidiums can be rewarding. I think probably I can safely say that in the Oncidium Alliance, the Miltoniopsis, apart from being the awkward cusses, have the largest blooms with some of the most spectacular colours and patterns, and are fragrant. And that's why people put up with their fussiness, because I've got one open. It's starting to go over now, but I've got one open at the moment, and this is just a hybrid, no ID. But you can see the blooms are quite large. They're pretty large. They've got pretty impressive patterning on them. So they are worthwhile attempting to grow them. And some people grow those perfectly happy in the home. These do like a little bit more humidity than some of the others. I say like, I didn't say demand, but it's like I said, if you want a good spike on a Miltoniopsis with the correct number of blooms for that plant, it's going to have to be near spot on. Because if it's stressed in any other way, it may well put a spike up. That spike might get trapped in the leaf. It's not enough to push it. It's worried. It's not happy. Yeah. And in addition to that, it may only have 1 or 2 blooms on. I mean, that one's only got 3. I think when I bought it, it had 5, maybe 6. Can't remember. And the pseudo bulb that was in bloom, I think, had 2 spikes, 1 out each side. Now that had obviously been grown virtually perfect before it came to me and I mucked it up. Well, that one is growing pretty good. The only one at the moment. So yeah, Oncidiums, rewarding, Make sure they stay in reasonably fresh media, and make sure you adjust the media for the root type. Fine roots tend to want a finer media. The more fleshier types generally want a more airy media, but make sure you've got the need moisture, drying out thoughts. The Rossio glossum does not like to dry out at all while that's growing, and that really goes for most Oncidiums. They don't want to go totally dry for any length of time, if any, when in active growth. However, when they're not growing at all, they're quite happy to dry out. In fact, I reduce the water down a fair old bit when they're not actively growing. What are they going to do with it? No new growths, they've got all their leaves, everything's full size, and there's no new roots. All you're doing is just keeping it ticking over, just gently, gently. And if it's cold, because your minimum temperatures in the winter in your place are lower than perhaps you'd like, then they're better off dry, quite honestly, and a trickle of water now and again to stop them shriveling. Till you see that growth come, then you can start building up again to the not allowing to go dry again. So, yeah. And I'll try and count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Some of these I don't even know what they are because they came from Jeff. So there's 10 over there. What is that one? God knows what that is. Right, where do we get to? 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. None on there. Up on here we've got 19, 20, 21, 22. No, that's not one, that's a zygote. 22, that one. Over here, that's a zygote. None there. No, oh, there's a Nelly Isla up there. We'll have that one. It's 23. Any here? Yep. 24, 25, 26, 27. Down the bottom, 28, 29. And then my actual Miltoniopsis, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35. And then we've got all of those, virtually all of the plants I got from Derek, which is another 18. I lost one of those the other day. So wherever we got to, 30 something plus that 18. So there's quite a high percentage of Oncidium types in my collection. None up there, is there? Oh, we missed that one. That's got spikes on as well. So yeah, there's there's 2 up there. There's a reasonably high percentage. So I've just seen some buds on something lurking up here. What the hell are they on? Oh, it's Hercoglossum. It's just that dropped all of its blooms ages ago. I can see 2 spikes. So it's going to have another little flush. It does that. As an initial run, 4 runners I call them. You know, they come out early, and then the main, you know, the flush, the main sort of thing, and then just a few dotted around as the season goes on. So yeah, I've got quite a few. I'm around 180 orchids at the moment. So you can see that's, as a percentage, there's a good few Oncidiums in there. The bulk are Dendrobiums, as you know. Right, so let's just chat about Oncidium types. The only thing I would say is if you're buying the mass-produced ones in the supermarket or anything like that, they're nearly always going to be in those cellophane cases because it makes them easy to transport and they don't get damaged. They will often be in cocoa peat, which holds an awful lot of water. And if they've been in that type of environment, like a supermarket or a do-it-yourself place, the people looking after them don't normally know what they're doing, and they get told, can you go and water those orchids? And they'll tip a couple of jugfuls on them, or pour a watering can all over them until it floods out the bottom. That's too much. In that type of media, that's too much. That's why by the time you buy them and get them home, they are either losing or have already lost their roots, and yet the plant still looks all right. It's a con. The plant can still look healthy, yeah, and can still have its flower spikes in full flood, nice green leaves, everything looks great, but the bottom end of it's totally gone. And you can't tell because it's in that cellophane sheath, so you can't even see if it's wobbling around in the pot. better off buying it at a nursery or at a show. You know, if you're going to buy a plant at a show, you can pick it up. And you don't need to go mad, but you can actually just do that. And if that plant comes towards you and goes away, the chances are the roots are gone. And if you're anything like me, you turn your back on the guy who's serving somebody else and just turn the plant straight upside down and lift the pot off and put it back on. You can keep that one. It's got no roots. But a lot of the sellers at shows, they've bought those plants in from the same places the supermarkets get theirs. You're getting the same plants originally, just hopefully the sort of seller you get at a show looks after them a bit better in between. Anyway, that'll do for today. As I said, my little battery will be, oh crikey, it's just gone yellow, so it's about to go red. So thanks for dropping by. And as I've said, I'm not going to harp on about all this stuff, subscribe, likes, Patreon, buy a coffee, all that sort of stuff in every video, because it'll drive people up the wall. But I do need to mention it because I do need the channel to grow. And the most popular video almost across the board is the Sunday chat. So that's where I'm going to do it, in that one, and not in many, if any, others. And big thanks for those that have joined in with the Patreon. You know, there's a good number in there now, 36 I think we're up to now. That's pretty good. Little community starting up over there. Somebody said, Roger's Orchid Society. It's sort of a bit like that, because you have to pay to be a member of an Orchid Society, don't you? Anyway, thanks for dropping by. Bit on Oncidiums and a bit of news about what's going on. Mum's settled at home. She's far from well. She's, you know, very, very, very unwell. But she's happier now at home, providing the curtains are right and she's at the right angle in her bed. You know, she sleeps most of the time, quite honestly. And some of the time she doesn't know what's going on around her. So that's how it is. See you next time. Thanks for dropping by. Whoops, forgot the joke on the end again. Short one this time. You don't want to go camping in the countryside in a tent. Every time the police find a body, it's in a tent. See you next time.